Well, hello there everyone. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is an amazing video game, and even that might be selling it short. It's a love letter to video games of yesteryear, but also shows some decent love towards some newer games that showed the world that yes, turn-based games can be amazing, and also you don't need to have a massive team or budget to make something truly special. Amazing what you can do with Mario and Luigi action commands. And I guess Lunar Lux as well. But it also has a lot of bosses, and I wanted to rank them, but good lord. This list was tough to make because not only are there more bosses in this game than most, but there's also a fair bit higher bar of quality as well, to the point that almost 10 bosses I could easily see being argued for the best in the game, and there's only one boss in the game I actively dislike, and today I'm going to be ranking the bosses from worst to best. Keep in mind, this video is just my opinion, so if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. I should also note, I won't be counting the chromatics unless they do something distinct to stand out from the crowd. I will also not be including the fights against Blanche or Painted Love. Blanche because I'm not evil enough to fight her, and Painted Love because it's just the first phase of two major bosses combined together, which I wouldn't rank as high as their original battles, and honestly I feel like talking about it would kind of take away from their story fights. It's entirely possible I missed a boss, as none of the online lists seem to have them all, so if I did miss something that isn't a chromatic, I don't know, leave a comment and call me an idiot or something. Also, for bosses fought multiple times, I'll be lumping their battles together with 2, maybe 3 exceptions. If you think that's too many concessions, don't worry, because this list still has 45 bosses. Oh boy, this is going to be a long one. Lastly, I don't speak French, so feel free to make fun of me and my butchered pronunciations in the comments. Either way, get comfy folks, as we talk about the one sour spot in an otherwise surprisingly well done boss roster. Number 45, the Giant Sapling. When looking at this game's great boss roster, there's one fight that sticks out like a sore thumb, and the only positive I can say for it is, at least it's optional. The Giant Sapling is a DPS race against a boss designed entirely to irritate you, as he does have a real attack, but it does barely any damage, and by barely any damage, I mean 5 or 6 damage per hit in a game where HP can go beyond 9,999. The Giant Sapling is doing his damnedest to exploit his alternate win condition of stalling you out for 6 turns so you can be crushed to death, giving an instant game over, and along the way he's gonna do 1 or 2 things. So he's basically like the demon wall from Final Fantasy. He'll either fire out his little projectiles that inflict the exhaust status effect, or he'll give himself shields to stop damage, so hopefully you have Mael with breaking rules in the party, or you're gonna have a not very fun time. And his projectiles are just very awkward for me to parry, like I cannot see them in this arena. Otherwise, if you're not ready to burst this boss down, be ready to get squished. Thankfully, because the boss is optional, you can always save this fight for later and come back to have a much easier time. Or you can choose to come back in Act 3 when you can break the damage cap and just straight up massacre this boss. I recommend doing that, it's actually much funnier that way. Number 44, Glaze. Or is it Glize? I don't really know, I don't really care. We're going from a boss that pissed me off to a boss that I honestly have nothing to say about. As a positive, I suppose it's the first optional boss at the end of an optional dungeon. Speaking of which, why is the mime here so freaking powerful? The boss itself is a normal battle, basically just a regular mid-game enemy being utilized as an optional boss, but with lower stats than normal because it's in the early game. It's fairly unremarkable unless you find it super early, and if you do, the attacks are just delayed enough to be kind of annoying. I don't know, not really much for me to say on this one. Number 43, Sorrowful Chapelier. Or is it Chapelier? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I thought there's supposed to be an E at the end of it. Anyways, originally I wasn't sure if I should lump the 3 masks together or rank them separately, but to be honest, I actually really like one of the fights, and they're kinda different, so I figured I'd give each of them their own spot, and the Mask of Sorrow is my least favorite of the bunch. I'm not one for doom and gloom, but more so I'm not a fan of this mask because the boss is one of the most annoying enemy types in the game, those little flying pot asshats. On top of that, the mask makes itself able to inflict exhaust upon you, which just kind of drags out the fight to make it potentially tedious, even more than it already was. and the only way to really beat the mask is to shoot him repeatedly because his evasion is so dang high you're not getting anywhere against him in a straight fight. Not the worst thing in the world, but this is definitely a pretty low on the ladder boss fight for me. Number 42, Stalakt. Visually, I love this boss's design. It reminds me a lot of the Samzaris boss fight from Spectrop's Origins. Probably just the head shape though. I remember seeing this guy and thinking, oh man, this fight is gonna be cool. And then the fight begins and where the hell is his health bar? See, unfortunately, despite having a mechanic to change between ice and fire elements, the Stalakt is less of a boss and more of a tutorial for gradient attacks. Okay, I guess, but honestly, why give him so little HP? You'll shoot him 3 times with your jump counters, use a gradient attack, he'll swap to fire mode, then you'll jump attack his next quake and just win because he has no HP. I feel like this fight would have been better if you needed to fill up the gauge on your own for the second gradient attack to truly finish the fight off. It would show the value of using higher AP skills to fill the gauge more, and therefore you'd want to parry more to get more AP out of it. Unfortunately, it just used a cool enemy design on a tutorial boss with a boss health bar that has no health in all reality. At least the cutscene after it is hilarious.
To what do we owe the pleasure of your company?
We're heading for old Lumiere.
Okay, bye.
Hey, come on. Hey. Hey, look. I know we failed before, but look, you doofus. Don't you recognize her?
Of course I do.
Then you know what that means. This is our shot. It might be our only shot.
This is your only shot. Out of the question. I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
Noko's coming too.
Oh, you are?
No me encanta dormir. Se me lo temo, Trésorier. A ver si el mejor mercantor del mundo.
As a responsible parent, this is a superb idea. Let us go to old Lumiere.
Number 41, The Lampmaster, round 2 in particular. At the end of the long-running Painter Workshop questline, you finally come face to face with the sealed-away beast, the Lampmaster. Now, some people may take issue with the boss being a refight of a story boss, but honestly, that didn't bother me. I thought the original Lampmaster fight was fun, and it was very clearly shown to have survived the battle, so having to run back against it was a cool idea. Sadly, the execution kinda missed the mark. It falls so short because it's just phase 2 of the fight, but now more annoying because there's no new attacks, it's just that all his moves are either the same or slightly modified, like his light sword combo being 3 strikes and just straight up one-shotting you, and his physical attacks draining your AP, or his combo finisher performing exhaust. I do like that his lamp ritual has been reanimated to be a bit harder to see what he's doing, so you have to pay attention closely. But unfortunately, the fight itself just isn't very fun because he has over 5 million HP, putting him in this awkward spot where he's either going to be one-shot by an in-game build, or he'll be a super tedious fight because you foolishly wanted to try and finish his questline that's been going on for half the game as soon as you begin Act 3 and have newfound freedom to do so. At the very least, the reward for winning is pretty worthwhile with the perfect catalyst to max out a weapon, and there is a very large difference between a weapon at level 33 compared to level 32, so that is something. But that's about it. This fight either needed a new phase exclusive to the Painter Workshop, or maybe have it swap between its phase 1 and phase 2 attack modes, since phase 1 mostly uses dark attacks while phase 2 focuses more on light attacks. Just a case of what could have been, and unfortunately what we got is kind of a letdown. Number 40, Goblu. Alright, this one may be a bit controversial. Goblu is one of the earliest bosses in the game, and at the end of one of the game's prettiest areas, but if I'm being honest, this fight was kind of a letdown for me. I think a big reason why is because he just doesn't do a whole lot, and he only has 2 attacks, either swiping at the player or a bounce attack, which is fine, but it's really weird how the previous boss just trained you on the likes of jumping to avoid attacks, and this boss makes absolutely no use of that mechanic. What he does use are flowers, which honestly can be ignored if you want, but the idea is that the blue flowers give him shields while the red flowers buff his attack. And that could be scary, but with only 2 attacks to him, there just isn't much to this fight. That being said, it is interesting how this boss escapes instead of dying, but kinda odd that we don't really fight him again in the story. There is, however, the rematch with a white Goblu in the Flying Manor, which is pretty notable, and it does look kinda cool. There's also the Chromatic Goblu, which acts as an optional overworld super boss that actually makes the flower gimmick threatening, as the buffs he applies are permanent and they stack, and he sprouts a metric fuck ton of flowers for you to deal with, as well as having his attacks go on for twice as long, so you can't just parry things as easily. Overall, it isn't exactly a bad fight, and I do think his boss music is excellent, but it's just weird how this boss comes after a Vake but feels like it has less going on, and it makes me wonder if this fight was actually made earlier in development. It might have been. But it also doesn't make use of the newly introduced jumping mechanic, which is also weird. I don't hate it, but it does feel like a bit of a downgrade from the boss you fought prior, which was a Vake. Number 39, the Mime. Alright, now for the next 3 bosses, we're going very strongly into meme tier. These next 3 fights are not mechanically complex or complicated at all, but for one reason or another they make me laugh enough to get more enjoyment out of them than any fight below them. That being said, there's still a clear hierarchy among the joke bosses, and the Mime is my least favorite of the lot. Mainly because you've already fought him multiple times by this point, and he just uses the same 2 bizarre looking but ultimately repetitive attacks over and over again. But the fact that they made one of these dudes into a super boss, and it takes place in the Hell Realm, is hilarious to me. I do have to ask though, are Mimes Gestrels? They seem kinda mechanical, but their bodies still look wooden like Gestrels, and they have the aggressive nature of a Gestrel as well. If there's an endgame explanation for it, I didn't find it, but hey, if anyone from Sandfall's watching this, please let me know. Number 38, Gros Tete. This fight is hilarious. First off, the dude is built like a regular show character, but more importantly, he has one attack and he's gonna spam it over and over again. Jump in the air and smash down on repeat, and it's up to you to parry, or at least survive, 156 attacks from him because he has way too much health and defense to be realistically defeated. So, how is this fight even possible without coming back in the endgame? Well, because the boss is that kid that spams the same attack over and over again in a fighting game, and after enough time, they'll either slip up and get punished, or they'll get fed up and decide, I don't want to play anymore. And in this case, the boss just straight up offs himself because he's sick of you not going down to his 156 attacks, and proceeds to blow himself up. Just make sure you have Minoko in the party to get his monster skill, because you won't get another chance until you're very deep into the post-game. Number 37, Francois. Francois is the joke boss of the game that is also Eskie's nemesis slash friend slash neighbor slash frenemy slash I don't know. He has a single attack, the strongest ice attack ever, which could very well one-shot the unprepared player, but the timing is so easy to dodge that this is actually the boss I recommend players tackle for the no damage against a boss achievement. Plus, his dialogue is absolutely hilarious.
Eskia! Stop sending hooligans over here!
Stop being a meanie. They're nice humans.
Then keep them on your side of the caves!
I gotta appreciate that despite only having 3 cutscenes in the game, his voice actor really puts his heart and soul into the role, and I gotta respect that. Number 36, the Chromatic Glissando. The Glissando and Chromatic Glissando are different enough fights that I consider each of them worth ranking separately. Unfortunately, the Chromatic variant is an honest-to-goodness downgrade over the original in my opinion. He may have some new attack timings, but it feels like he has less attacks, as I only ever saw him inflict dizzy on the party and spam his tail swipes over and over again until the cows come home, while losing some of his other attacks like summoning out monsters or devouring party members. It was kind of baffling. I suppose he does stand out a tiny bit since he has a second phase which is new, where the ballet enemies will surprise you in a hidden phase too, but when the enemies are best dealt with by aiming for the head and mag dumping them, I can't give it too much praise because that's still not that fun. Number 35, Jovial Moisinus, or however the heck you pronounce that. The Mask of Joy is an enthusiastic fellow, but he's also the boss I have the least to say about on this list of 45 bosses, and its only gimmick is slightly healing the monster that acts as his avatar. But really, this is the only boss in the game I have nothing really to say about. It's basically just a regular enemy battle. Now, it's fairly fun because I like the game's combat, but it's just a normal battle with passive healing thrown in. Number 34, the Curator. Now we're back to the tutorial bosses, and the Curator is here for one reason and one reason only, and that's to teach you about attacks that require jumping in order to avoid them. Overall, I think it works well, being in an isolated environment where things are relatively safe before the game will really crank things up, and you'll have later bosses that incorporate jumping attacks mid-combo. Overall, it works okay, and he has enough HP to last more than one turn, as it will instead last 2 turns. How innovative. And the other big tutorial fight, well, okay, not quite. I'm not counting the first fight with Mael because that's literally nothing at all. Instead, I'm looking at the second battle against Mael that acts as your cap-off to the game's prologue, in a battle you don't actually have to win, but now the game is going to force you to work for your victory, and overall, it can act as a fun enough mark to see how much you've learned so far, as Mael is capable of quick attacks and flurry as well. Overall, it's a simple battle, having it be your close-off to the prologue, and the gatekeeper to the third and final token makes it a respectable enough fight in my eyes, and I think it does okay. We're starting to get into more notable fights at this point. Number 32, Chromatic Chevalier. This guy really only gets a spot because he's at the end of a neat little optional dungeon that'll probably be one of the first 2 or so that you go to in Act 3. The Chromatic Chevalier takes the elemental blade strikes from the original Gold Chevalier and cranks everything up to shit 100 and fuck by now having combos that go on a lot longer and are far more dangerous, with things like the Fire Spin that not only goes for 7 hits, but he whiffs the first hit on purpose to psych you out. And this fight is just downright brutal if you're not over leveled, because while his moveset is limited, he can kill you very quickly with a single slip up, but ultimately, it's still a neat boss at the end of a decent puzzle dungeon, and it's overall fun. I think it would have been cooler though if you just had one Chromatic Chevalier that had the movesets of all 3 in one opponent though. Number 31, the Chosen Path battles. The Chosen Path is one of Act 3's many optional trials where the player will be forced to take on 5 different foes in any order they choose, but with the catch that all 5 of them must be defeated in one-on-one combat, and as the fights go on, you have fewer and fewer party members to choose from, so all 5 must ultimately be used in order to see the end of this place. All the fights take place against mini-boss tier enemies, making things feel a bit more significant than just regular trash mobs, while not overwhelming, and the fact that all 5 of them have reskin designs, or at least different textures, gives the fight a bit more oomph to me. It's nothing crazy, but it's kinda like the original creations from Final Fantasy X, and any comparison I can make to Final Fantasy X is pretty much always a good thing. I think these fights are okay for what they are. Number 30, the Gestural Tournament. It's similar to the Chosen Path battles, but here you can utilize all 3 party members, or just one, it's entirely up to you. The thing that matters is you'll have to beat all 3 Gestural Warriors and their bizarre attack timings in order to come face to face with the new champion of the tournament, and of the arena, the Mysterious Stranger. Night after night, battle after battle, we've watched the Stranger rise through the ranks. That's the second time I've referenced KOTOR in relation to this one boss fight in particular. Anyways, CL is a super easy fight, but she's a lot quicker and more combo focused of an opponent than anything else, but she's sadly held back from higher spots because of her non-existent health bar. Regardless, I do still think this little sequence of events is pretty fun, and it's a nice little mini arc of just tournament stuff, because why not? Though I would recommend the players use Mael to beat this one, because she gets a special weapon that can only otherwise be obtained if you defeat one of the super bosses. Number 29, Golgra. Golgra is likely one of the first super bosses players will face, and I remember hearing horror stories about how tough she was, only for me to completely dominate her. See, this is a game that can very easily be broken in half, but thankfully I seem to have found a pretty decent balance for 95% of the game, only really steamrolling Glyce and the fight against Golgra. I mean, who cares if she's in Super Saiyan form if Gradient Counter does her in immediately after? I could see this fight as being cool, but ultimately I ended up being overprepared for the battle. At least the pre-fight cutscene's hilarious, and there is at least the potential for an awesome fight here. I just ended up having a super easy time with it.
I demand a trial by combat.
Do I have to participate?
Please help me.
Number 28, Chromatica Kazier. As far as I know, this is the only required chromatic fight in the game. Okay, well technically you could theoretically juke him, but good frickin' luck with that. This fight is just creepy, with his design reminding me of an anglerfish with the light, to say nothing of the quadrupedal flesh monster that looks like it jumped straight out of Bloodborne, and the backpack kind of looking like a gestural merchant's in the process. Everything about this fight just feels wrong, from the off-time combos to the jump attack that combos into a gradient, to him dealing blight damage to reduce your maximum HP, and in a game with such an amazing soundtrack, it sticks out like a sore thumb when you have a boss fight lacking any music aside from the occasional distant piano keys. Like, for a brief moment, the final dungeon goes from epic battle into a horror game. But I will say, if nothing else, the fight does nail the most important thing in any video game according to Demon's Souls fans. That's right, it nails the
Good atmosphere.
Number 27, Awake Trio. The Awake Trio is a trio of 3 elemental variations of the Awake, each with their own weaknesses and resistances, with the key distinction being that during the fight, 2 of the 3 Awakes will be invulnerable each turn, and they will swap every single turn, making this a game of murder hot potato, while all 3 of them more or less use the same attacks, just with different elemental affinities and maybe slightly different timings. I could see how this fight could get annoying super fast, but luckily I came into this level after completing Renwar's drafts, so I found it a mildly enjoyable puzzle boss, but I could quickly see how it'd be not very enjoyable, or at least less enjoyable. I know I'm glossing over the moves here a bit, but that's because I want to go into more detail when we talk about the next boss on the list. Number 26, Awake. The first true boss of the game, and man does it leave an impression with the intense music and straight up murdering Leo. Oh no, we knew him so well. Either way, Awake is a boss that actually leaves a pretty good first impression with different attacks like thrusting both spears into the ground. Don't worry about me not being able to parry it, I sucked at that in the early game. And he's got rhythmic spells that can be fun to dodge, but are also good design for early game boss fights because it gives you a very clear tell of the attack timing. The battle isn't too hard, but it can be tougher than anything you've faced up to this point in the game, which is good for the first real boss fight. The boss even has a pinch phase where, when at low HP, he'll shield himself with a bunch of shields and begin charging up this big powerful attack, and that's your cue to win now or you'll be bombarded by a series of earth spells. And the fight is also your introduction to the shielding mechanic, where each shield will hard stop a single attack no matter how strong or weak, outside of breaking rules, but we don't worry about that. So it's up to you to utilize multiple hit attacks or use your gun to get around these shields in an efficient manner. So you're actually going to be using different skills and not just the thing that does the most damage, which I like. Plus, I think the music in this fight does a good job allowing the fight to stand out as well, thanks to the vocals by Alice Duport-Percier. I may have butchered that name. Given that it's the first true boss of the game, it's not the most complex in the world, but it's still a fun fight that works well for its early game placement, and I'd say we are firmly in the good boss territory from this point forward. And we've still got 25 more to go. Number 25, Seething Bouchelier. I really don't know how to pronounce this. Anyways, the last of the 3 masks, the Mask of Anger, is an interesting opponent. Once again, taking an enemy's template, but the mask here is more mechanically interesting than the other 2, as the enemy he uses has melee combos, a gradient attack, a defense buff, and a counter stance that he can enter, making it where if you attack him, he'll attack you back. But you can cancel out of his counter stance by shooting him in the shield mouth thing, and the Mask of Anger is seething all over the place, which really means that the boss gets double actions every turn, which I think makes the fight more interesting than the other two masks, which just passively heal or mildly inconvenience you. This makes the boss battle into a more notable threat and by far the most enjoyable of the bunch. But the oddest thing about this battle is the boss music. It's a good track, don't get me wrong, but for some reason, this is one of only 2 songs in the game that I know of that have vocals that are in English. And giving it to one random emotion mask instead of a major story boss is honestly kind of hilarious to me, especially given where the other English song is used. Either way, out of the 3 masks of emotions, the one motivated by the power of spite ends up performing the best of the bunch in this boss ranking. Who'da thunk? Number 24, Tisher. This boss is kind of in an interesting spot, as it's a completely unique boss that, while connected to a story boss, is completely optional. And that does give it some points, but sadly, it isn't quite as fun to actually fight as a boss like this maybe should be. Story-wise, Tisher is the dressmaker for the second Axon, Seirin, and spoilers, you won't be seeing that fight on here for a while. I love the design of this boss being a giant mechanical doll made of various sewing materials and spools, I guess, effectively being a giant textile mill. The boss also has 2 different combos that can be pretty fun to dodge and react to, although its mechanical movement can be somewhat awkward at first. But as far as I can tell, those 2 combos are also the only attacks the boss has outside of an opening move with throwing needles that inflicts curse on the player, guaranteed to kill them in 9 turns. Not a terrible idea to increase urgency, but small problem is that you can clear the status effects, so it makes the whole turn limit kind of pointless. Maybe I just got bad RNG, but I fought the boss twice and I only ever saw the same 2 moves used on repeat, and I feel like a boss connected to an Axon could have possibly stood to have an additional attack or 2. I mean, you can skip it and make the Axon fight harder, supposedly, but unlike with the Visages where the path to the boss is right in front of you, the path to Seirin has you traverse a whole ass dungeon, and this guy is along the main path. You literally take like 3 steps off the path to go fight it. And the only point I can see for a player skipping him is a low level run, because there's really no reason not to fight him. He's right there, he's easy to access, and beating him gets you a Pecto, so that makes you immune to the charm status effect, which is useful for the boss fight. Overall, I like the design. It is a cool looking boss, I just wish there was a bit more to it. Number 23, Chromatic Jar. Chromatic Jar is one of those bosses that's actually kind of distinct despite being an upgraded form of a regular enemy, because he's one of the 2 bosses you'll find chilling out in the overworld as soon as you begin Act 2. The other being Sprung, which is your introductory super boss and you have no chance against it. The Jar, on the other hand, is a boss with 3 distinct attacks, as he's always in his Jar ritual sort of phase. And he resists basically all damage types from normal attacks, and elemental attacks as well. The true strategy is to counter his hits and shoot his lantern, as it's always vulnerable, but he won't just give you the win, as he's the first boss to have a 6-hit spin to win combo that cannot be underestimated. 1 hit will be enough to take you out, as well as a ground smash where he tries to fake you out before sending out a shockwave that must be jumped, and a magic smash combo that must be dodged first. Then you'll have the shockwaves travel back inwards, requiring you to jump them before sending out 2 more shockwaves that must be dodged. This boss may have a small moveset, but the power and agility of these moves make them demanding enough to deal with. It's not going to be an easy fight, but man, if his swing combo isn't fun to parry. Top it off with a criminally underrated boss theme, and you have something that's a surprisingly well-made mini-boss, and probably my favorite chromatic boss that's just an enhanced version of its normal enemy counterpart. Plus, the reward you get for victory is the Jarum, which is arguably Mael's best weapon, and was an instrumental part for me defeating the hardest boss in this game. It is a godsend against Simon. But we will get to that fight much later. Number 22, Gargant. Now, if I was only counting the Gargant and the Monolith, this guy would be down in the mediocre tier on Fraud Watch alongside Glyce. But unlike that cheap knockoff, the real Gargant is currently chilling out, pun not intended, in the Frozen Hearts dungeon and is a legitimate boss fight, and likely your first opponent to break 1 million HP, unless you're a crazy man and did Sprung early like I did, or I guess if you fought the Patrons on the highest difficulty. Gargant is that boss that may as well be the welcome to the post-game, have fun, as the boss has control over both fire and ice with his various punch combos, explosions, blizzards, and the ability to freeze a party member, and if you don't free that frozen party member, the Gargant will one-shot them with a fire attack, but if you play a mini-game of shooting his teleporting orbs, not only will you explode the orbs and deal damage to the boss, but you'll also instantly thaw the frozen party member. It just struggles compared to some fights because unfortunately it's placed in an awkward spot in the game, because if you come here in Act 2, it's way too hard. But if you come here in Act 3, there's a very high chance you'll be so overpowered that you'll literally one-shot this boss, as 1 million HP is a lot for Act 2 standards. That's nothing for Act 3 standards, because you can break the damage cap by that point. Still, it's not impossible to assume you'll come here when your level is around the mid-60s, at which point he does strike a solid enough balance, so I think he earns a spot here in the good tier. Number 21, Chromatic Luster. This is probably one of the most interesting chromatics in the game. Chilling out in the trenches of the old battlefield, you'll come across the Chromatic Luster who jump scares you and rushes your ass down. And instead of just being a regular enemy with increased damage, this boss is always on fire, making him your first opponent that just straight up absorbs an element. Fire will not work on him at all. The Luster actually has fairly low health, but he has a gimmick where all of his attacks can set you on fire, and after a few turns pass, he will absorb the burn status from your party members in order to heal himself, but it means you no longer take damage over time. So it makes status curing useful for both survival and for stopping the boss from regaining HP. I think it's one of the better uses of a boss that takes a regular enemy template and evolves it, making the fight a bit of a sleeper hit for me. Plus, Energizing Parry is a really freaking good reward for victory, and I highly recommend you go out of your way to take this guy out. It will be worth your while. Number 20, Clair Obscur. At the end of the Monolith, quite possibly the longest dungeon in the entire game, you will enter an area known as Tainted Lumiere. And here you can find a secret boss hidden away near the end of the dungeon and backed up by both the Clair and Obscur enemies. These two provide him shields and the Berserk status effect, allowing him to take double actions. This boss is a clever twist on the standard chromatic variants because instead of being an enhanced version of one enemy, it takes two of the game's tough mini-bosses and combines them together. And make no mistake, this is not an easy fight, as he has some ridiculously delayed attacks that would make an Elden Ring boss blush. I like this boss, and I do wish other enemies that had multiple variants would have a boss or mini-boss version that combines their movesets together. I think this is really cool. It is kind of weird though, how a boss that shares the name with the game itself is just an optional boss hidden near the end of Act 2's final dungeon. You figure it would be either important to the plot or the game's big super boss. Still fun though.
Ladies, could I interest you in a duel?
Monoko is awesome. Dude has all the makings of a joke character with his goofy nature and dialogue, but he has enough serious moments and some genuine cool factor to make him an awesome character in my opinion. Being a Gestural, the man has some very bizarre attacks with him doing flips in midair and using his bonking stick to do some special damage, but he also has a special ability no other Gestural has, allowing him to turn into Neverons, taking their form, to utilize their attacks, and this ability carries over with the player themselves. In short, he's a blue mage, and it makes for a very fun battle with some awesome boss music that's very distinct from any other song in this game. And again, his dialogue is hilarious.
No distraction, son. I'm really busy beating up strangers.
His rematch is made a bit harder as he has some additional Nevron forms, like the Stalact he can turn into, with it being a 1v1 as well, and higher stats overall. The fight can be tougher, unless you're fighting him in Act 3, in which case you'll probably one-shot him. Monoko is a player boss done right, where he's strong as an opponent, but an absolute monster in your party, and I love him. If I was to redo that video on my top 10 favorite playable bosses, I'd probably put him in the top 5. He's that awesome. Number 18, Chromatic Petanque. The best chromatic in the game is not a very straightforward fight. The Chromatic Petanque is a big boy, able to blast you with the power of God, but he's really not that offensive. Unlike other Petanques, he never actually tries to run away. Instead, he's going to rely primarily on attacking you and summoning the Petanques of other varieties to battle, such as the blue Petanque that creates shields, the green Petanque that makes you play a shooting minigame, the red Petanque that summons enemies to assist it, the purple Petanque that just sort of dies, and the gold Petanque that, well, you got me on that one, I have no clue. There's no real danger of death in this boss fight. Instead, it's a juggling act as you need to find the time to destroy his Petanques while also getting damage in on the boss himself, because the smaller Petanques will in fact try to run away and end things prematurely, so it's really just a gimmick boss. But the boss having you effectively play mini-games throughout the fight is actually a pretty fun diversion for a semi-hidden away opponent, and the reward for slaying the Petanque is more than worth it, as you not only gain an absurd amount of HP and defense, but also an immunity to stun, one of the most dangerous status effects in the later game, especially with some of these super bosses where a stun may as well be a death sentence. Number 17, Glissando. It's like the chromatic Glissando, but better and kinda creepy looking. Like his Biclops counterpart, the giant rattlesnake is capable of performing tail swipes, but the tail is no longer just a giant shoot me, here's my weakness point. And the boss just feels like it has a larger moveset here, as it'll do things like swipe with its tail, slam its head into the ground repeatedly, and then when it drops below half health, you'll see him start trying to inflict the charm status on your party members, devouring them, effectively banishing them from the battle, and my personal favorite is being able to summon other enemies from the area to make use of their attacks, such as the ballets. Despite looking like a big scary snake wrapped up, it fits the area well, and is a simple but very fun boss fight, and I'm glad it didn't get copy-pasted constantly, instead remaining exclusive to the Isle of Seiren, making it feel like something a little more special. Overall, it's a surprisingly fun boss that acts as some decent build-up to the Seiren boss fight, which you're still not going to be seeing for a good while on this list. Spoilers, it's pretty dang high. Number 16, Creation. At the very end of the game, right before the final battle, Renoir throws one last roadblock your way in the form of the Creation, a monstrous beast with a horse-like body and movements that are odd, to put it mildly. This fight can be rough, as you'll near instantly be put into the inverted state, and the boss has more than a few ways to force you back into that state should you kill yourself. All the while, the aberrations are just here to make life a little bit harder with their light and dark attacks. This boss looks wild, and honestly, with the sky that is sometimes red and sometimes blue and the strobe lights, it makes for an extremely memorable boss fight. Albeit, at first, the Cosmic Horse is actually fairly straightforward, just going for basic physical attacks, and I was worried it was going to be little more than a speed bump. But then when dropping below half health, he takes to the sky, armoring up and creating void orbs that will blow up one at a time for massive damage. You can shoot them, and they actually cause you to regain health. However, you're still under the inverted status effect, so instead of healing you, you'll actually take damage from the orbs, meaning you either need to play ballsy or be very prepared for this effect. I honestly love this phase because it adds a lot to the fight, changing the boss from feeling like a generic monster and turning it into something more fitting of a cosmic horror made from the corpses of men, and maybe a little bit of driftwood too. And it's also worth mentioning the Chromatic Creation, being effectively a secret boss hidden away in Renoir drafts, is also pretty memorable, taking his combos and cranking them up to 9001, and both of these fights are just a lot of fun and way better than I'd expect from a boss with basically no story significance other than big monster that's created by the main bad guy. Plus, while not exclusive to this boss fight, I actually kind of like that the music that plays here is Take Down the Paintress. It became sort of a regular boss theme in the early game, but just sort of disappeared after a while, so it was nice to hear it play again one last time near the end of the journey. Number 15, Burgeon. As far as no story bosses that recur kinda often go, this boss is one of my favorites. The design is very imposing compared to your run-of-the-mill giant creatures, and this boss fight is kinda like Midgar's Alam, where he has the ability to swallow a party member, removing them from the fight, unless doing enough damage to release them, but that basically requires breaking, which is not too likely at this early in the game. But what really makes this fight stand out is the build-up of the fight, as you initially see one that is far too large for you to stand a chance against in the ecological dead zone area, but then you see another smaller one just a minute or two later, and the game lets you fight this one. The Burgeon has the ability to spit exhaust miasma at you, or perform various combinations of melee strikes, one after another, with potentially off timing, making for a challenging but really fun early game optional fight that the player can take on. Of course, he doesn't stop there, as he becomes somewhat of a recurring challenge for players to take on throughout the game, and honestly, I think it's a fun time. On one hand, it still puts up a fight even halfway through the game, but on the other hand, it acts as a great measuring stick to show just how far you, the player, have come dealing with this threat, as his stats become increasingly more dangerous, but your own arsenal continues to grow more and more, and you're able to meet the challenge. As a boss that's biggest story role is being set dressing and getting one-shot by SKA goes, I think the Burgeon is a more than commendable recurring fight, and I honestly enjoy fighting him again and again. I look forward to the challenge. Number 14, Renoir. At the end of Old Lumiere, we have our first fight against the main antagonist that isn't a scripted encounter, and it is cool getting to do battle with him roughly halfway through the game. As an encounter, he can potentially be scary with his love of spamming different gradient attacks on top of his super weird combo attack timings, not to mention his special ability to permanently banish a party member from battle, making for a terrifying foe, and he summons out mysterious petals that will support him throughout the battle and are capable of restoring half his health. The music also slaps here, so this should be an amazing boss fight. It should be. But it falls ever so short for one particular reason, and that's the fact that he's too flimsy and will die way too easily most of the time. During my main playthrough, I genuinely had to check to make sure I didn't accidentally lower the difficulty to easy mode because I was whooping his ass that much. Now, expert mode is definitely tougher, and he even busted out a new cinematic move where he used the power of the masks to attack, which was cool. But unless you're playing on expert mode, there's a decent chance this boss fight won't get to do much of anything because he has no HP. Now granted, there was an update recently that let you modify boss stats and increase their max HP, but I'm not going to be counting that for the sake of this list. I will say though, the cutscene that follows is really good, like Minoko cradling his dead son in his arms. There's more emotion in that one character interaction with a guy that can't even do facial expressions than I've seen from most AAA games I've played. Overall, great fight, but it could be better. Number 13, Clair. Clair is one of this game's super bosses, and she just barely misses out on the amazing tier for me, though I could see others placing this boss higher. I could also see them placing her fight much lower. See, Clair is the creator of the Nevrons, and therefore she's capable of summoning them to act as her attacks throughout the fight. However, instead of just using their movesets, she chains their attacks together and sometimes spams the Nevron attack on repeat, leading to her having some of the toughest combos in the game to deal with. This is actually pretty awesome, but it has an issue. For one, the camera zooms out, making it harder to see what's going on, so there's a decent chance you might just get whacked until you've memorized the timings. I know I definitely had trouble with that. Most of them aren't too bad once you see them once or twice, but the Violent Nevron combo is just plain absurd for me. I cannot get that one down. Second is, at low health, she summons a Burgeon to devour one of your party members for the rest of the fight, just making the battle into an even longer war of attrition, and if she takes your primary damage dealer, you might just be out of luck and have to reset. Thankfully for me, during this run she took CL, whom I mostly use for healing and support, not for damage. The last and largest issue is her healing mechanic. Every turn, she'll begin by performing an action to heal her HP, and the amount she recovers depends on the difficulty. On normal, it's a bit over 500,000, but on expert it exceeds 1 million, and the only way to stop it is to perfectly parry all of her attacks and get a counter attack off on her. That will disrupt her healing. Getting hit once, or dodging, means she's about to recover a ton of health, and you just gotta kinda take it. But, as an inverse, her actual max health is really low for a super boss, to the point I think Duelist, which you have to beat to reach her, has more HP. This means that she's going to be a super long oppressive learning curve, but a boss that dies in 1 minute once you learn her, and while some people may like that, I personally would have preferred if Clair had about double the health, but healed only about half as much. I think that would have made the fight more satisfying personally, because she has a fun moveset once you learn it, but learning it can just feel downright oppressive, and is the reason I think she gets outperformed by the other super bosses in the game, Mime notwithstanding, and also Lampmaster 2.0 notwithstanding. Speaking of Lampmaster, number 12, Lampmaster. The Lampmaster is the final boss of the game's first act, and a truly bizarre fight that shows off how creative this game's boss fights can truly be. It's also the first boss to have 2 separate health bars, and if there's one thing this boss fight nails, it's very clearly the
Good atmosphere.
But in all seriousness, both phases of this boss fight feel fairly distinct, as phase 1 has the boss primarily using dark elemental attacks and attacking you like some sort of savage animal with powers far beyond normal. But you'll notice every turn he also has projectiles fire from his lamp, but after they fire, the lamps go out. So, hey, what if I shot him? Well, you'd be rewarded with thinking, because then the lamps would break and he'd be unable to fire them until he repairs them. Overall though, the fight is fun, but it does seem a little bit too easy, especially for the final boss of Act 1, and after we've had the likes of the Ultimate Sock Patat, who had like 37 different mechanics going on at once.
Hey, don't jinx us. No need to invite misfortune.
I don't see any stones.
What's happening?
Misfortune.
Of course, then you get to phase 2, and now the Lampmaster will perform combos far more deliberate as the monster starts wielding a sword, as well as replacing his usual lamp attack with a lamp ritual that you will have to shoot the 4 lamps in order as they flash in order to stop the ritual from going off, as the ritual will allow the boss to unleash a powerful blade of light that deals enough damage to potentially one-shot weaker players. And what's funny is how a boss with such reliance on shooting precise shots is also the first boss to use the Dizzy status effect in order to make it harder for you to hit your targets. Overall, I'd say this fight's a ton of fun and acts as a good cap-off to Act 1 with a little bit of challenge and a lot of creativity. I just wish the Fated rematch was a bit better. Number 11, Serpent Fair. Early on in the game, when you're exploring the Flying Waters area of the game, which is like the second major dungeon, you see this gigantic leviathan fly overhead, making even the Burgeons look tiny in comparison, and if your first thought isn't, I want to fight that, then I don't know what to tell you. Well, spoilers, you do eventually get to fight one of them, as they are one of the game's many super bosses, but Serpent Fair is interesting as its health is actually on the lower end, sitting at only about 5.5 million, which yes, is quite small for this point in the postgame. But it makes up for it because the boss has 2 very unique abilities. One of them is absorbing all your AP, basically every single chance it gets, while the other is repeatedly creating shields for itself to make it hard to actually damage the boss. On top of that, this boss absorbs gunfire, as its entire gimmick is absorbing AP, and your bullets are, well, AP bullets. Now, initially, this seems like a crock of horse shit, and requires some uber powerful build to utilize it to beat the boss, but that's not actually the case. For one, the shield gimmick and AP drain make you need to approach this boss differently instead of focusing on more like high-speed multi-hit attacks or breaking rules to get around the insane levels of defense and get your damage in when you can. But the thing that makes this boss fight fun and not bullshit, at least in my opinion, is the fact that when it absorbs enough AP, it'll overload itself and explode, taking significant self-damage and also forcing it into a stun state that, unique to this boss, doesn't alter its stun meter at all, meaning the real strategy is to make this man suffer from his own gluttony, all while doing damage along the way. A broken build can easily bypass the gimmick and likely one-shot the boss, but I like trying to engage with the game's mechanics, and I found those mechanics to be a lot of fun in this instance. I appreciate that the super bosses in this game weren't just stat-bloated damage sponges, even if that does mean some builds can one-shot each and every one of them, bypassing their phases and mechanics entirely. Still, I thought Serpent Fair was a good deal of fun, and yeah, I'd say it's one of the better super bosses I fought in an RPG, and yet we've still got a couple more to go. Number 10, Alicia. From one super boss to another, Though calling Alicia a super boss is probably a bit generous as her damage is fairly low, but her speed and aggression combined with you only having access to Mael during the fight make it a lot tougher than it otherwise would be, as you don't have the overpowered super nuke that is Gamage yet, since this is the fight you get that from. I'm not sure if I wish she was tougher, or if I'm glad that she's honestly not that bad, as it allows the impact of the story to hit harder because there's no real risk of major frustration from dying over and over again. This is a battle of copy versus original, which is pretty much a legal requirement in any video game narrative that has a character be a clone. Except Phantasy Star Online 2, I guess. This fight is a no-frills duel in front of the third Axon, and it's quite enjoyable, and probably one of the first dungeons I recommend players tackle at the beginning of the post-game, or maybe Act 3, depending on how you feel. Kinda weird though, how she only gives you resplendent chroma catalysts, meanwhile some of the enemies you could fight before her give glorious catalysts. I don't know. Probably just a way to upgrade her weapon, because it's not going to be quite as strong. Overall, it's a fun boss fight that, given the story significance, I'm surprised the developers had the ball to make this fight completely optional. On a different note, poor Verso, dude cannot catch a break. Number 9, Sprung. Out of this game's many super bosses, Sprung is the first boss you will see and the one you can encounter. He's chilling out right next to the island where you begin Act 2 of the game, and he will absolutely annihilate your ass. This boss is meant to be your measuring stick, the thing you're gonna work towards to eventually overcome in Act 3. Except I decided to do the absolutely insane thing and fight him in Act 2. Don't do that! But it was a ton of fun, if partially because I was fighting him while streaming the game to some friends, so they were in a call with me and they got to witness my insanity in real time, which did lead to some downright hilarious moments. Actually, no.
What is that face? Dear Lord. That
What?
fucking face.
Oh, yeah.
Go back to my own thing. Look at that, dude. She looks fucking traumatized, dude.
Well, to be fair, this is Act 2.
She looks like Sprung just pulled his dick out. Like, just like, God damn.
Now, while Sprung is one of the easier super bosses, he can still be very hard at first because he is the first super boss you'll likely encounter. But he's also predictable, as he will follow a very strict pattern of slam, a combination of light and dark lasers, go crazy with the slams, charge up, and then unleash the powers of the abyss upon you. And technically, the boss does have 3 phases, with him increasing the number of attacks he does with each of his actions, but he doesn't gain any new attacks. In a way, this is actually a fair bit like another super boss we'll be talking about later on in this video. Some may say that's dumb, but considering how long this fight was, taking me over 36 minutes, I think I prefer a boss that just builds upon what's already there instead of turning into something completely different. Overall, I found this boss to be a ton of fun, and while a large part of that was because I was in a call with friends, it was still something special that's gonna stick with me. And I mean, hey, if a boss ever gives you a feeling of exhilaration when you beat it, that's a sign you probably did something good. Holy shit, I did it!
They did a good job making all the characters.
Victory! Look at the fucking look at that. Look at that. Look at it.
Oh,
Why
fuck!
does it say cheater in all caps, cheater?
That's
Okay, so looks like he has 2.1 million HP. Okay.
Oh, wow.
He's done.
Gained like what? 5 levels on everyone?
Yeah. Oh wait, yeah, it does say cheater. Oh, that's fucking awesome. Okay. Okay, I am going to save my game and I am going to just like Number 8.5, Scavenger. Okay, so if you're wondering why the fuck is there an 8.5 here, well, the simple fact is this was actually a boss I didn't find until after I'd already recorded basically everything for the video and beat Simon as well. This boss is designed for Act 2, so when I initially fought him, he was a boss I just killed in one hit, and I thought, oh, well that's disappointing, and I was going to leave him in the bottom near Gleis. But they just released patch 1.3.0, which allows you to modify the boss's stats, or at the very least their HP, and a couple other little things, to make them more powerful. So I gave this boss the times 100 HP, so he would have enough health to actually survive against my Simon killing build on normal mode. And you know what? Yeah, I see the vision. His damage wasn't really keeping up, but mechanics-wise, this fight is awesome, and I definitely see him being a ton of fun. I kind of wish he might have actually been a super boss, or maybe have him be a little bit easier to find, though maybe it's just me, because, again, I did not find this guy until after Simon, and I only knew he existed because he was in a video. I didn't see it anywhere on any of the boss lists, I didn't see it on Fextra Life, I didn't see it anywhere. But it was a lot of fun. Phase 1 is interesting. It's kind of like a warm-up act where you're fighting a monster that really just does a few basic slams, nothing too crazy. The real catch is when you get to Phase 2. He'll darken the sky, begin summoning out masks, and then hides himself in the fog. At this point, these masks are going to fire beams of lasers at you, and it's up to you to just pull out your gun and start shooting at them until you eventually break all of them. Once all the masks are broken, the boss will be revealed and you'll be able to start doing damage again. This phase is more so a puzzle phase than anything else, but it's still a ton of fun. In his final phase, he darkens the sky and starts going crazy with the attack spam, using his dark elemental punches over and over and over again, and this phase could be seen as a burn phase because he only really seems to do it when he's at about 10% HP, but it's still pretty fun as well. The music is nice and somber, the fight poses a decent challenge, and while I do wish he wasn't quite so easy to miss, there's also something to be said and something to be respected about developers willing to put some really good content that they're not afraid to let the player miss. That shows a level of confidence in game design that you don't see in most AAA games, so I respect seeing it here. And actually getting to fight the boss and not just one-shot him, yeah, this fight is excellent. It's a lot of fun, I like it a lot. Number 8, Ultimate Suck Patat. Probably a weird choice to be so high up, but my personal favorite boss of Act 1 is the Ultimate Suck Patat. The all-powerful creation made by the Jestrals guarding their village from intruders, and it's where the game shows how complex the bosses can truly be. The boss has a massive shield, and it can use it to bash your head in, as well as apply mark to your party member. And it can perform melee combos that incorporate a jump attack into them, it's capable of using its shield cannons, and it can raise its shield to enter a defensive stance that will counter your attacks. It's really cool and I like it a lot. But the real shake-up is when stunned, instead of just taking more damage, its shoulder weak spot is wide open so you can fire on that shoulder, and with enough punishment, you'll be able to break it off, which sends him into an enraged mode where he will now go crazy with his melee attacks, but loses all the attacks with his left arm, so instead he just starts using either his dead body as a weapon, or he starts firing the electric catapult. And I just want to point out, this boss is beating you with the corpse of one of its people. That is both macabre and freaking hilarious. But what really bumps this fight up to amazing tier for me is the arm break. While he does play more defensive early on, it's possible to actually break his arm joint early with clever use of his stagger animation after shooting him, which will force him into his pinch mode early where he only has 2 attacks. This is also the first boss where I managed to get the no damage achievement, so it gets a few extra points for that. It's cool, and I'm glad that the game actually lets you do this if you're quick on the draw. While a vacant Goblu did definitely set strong early impressions, this goofy looking mech was where the game truly showed off how creative and interesting its boss fights truly could be, and where I really fell in love with this game. Number 7, Visages. The Axon bosses are truly on another level, and somehow, here at number 7, we're at the bosses I'd consider to be in the upper echelons of video game boss design, with the first Axon, Visages, setting a strong first impression, as this boss has a sense of scale that eclipses pretty much any other fight in this game up to this point, and very few fights after it even match up. Visages is a bulky foe, but he's not impossible because he always telegraphs what attack is coming by the mask that will emerge from the mirror when the fight begins. And if you've played this far, you know by now the rule to shoot the glowy spot, as that is going to be what you need to do for this fight. When they're destroyed, they will be unable to return to the mirror, and the mask will be destroyed permanently, removing the corresponding attack from Visages, so it's entirely possible that you could force him to just use one attack over and over as you chip away at him. But since you can kind of reduce his moveset, what if you break every single mask? Well, then you are able to end the fight early, but he'll use his powers to unleash all the remaining power in those broken masks for a big explosion that leaves your party at 1 HP before dying prematurely.
People want so badly to know what's behind the mask. Front, back, recto, verso. Great art is both window and mirror. Whether it's your mask or theirs.
Harmless, huh?
He's the real Axon.
Child, we all need masks, but how you use them.
But the fight doesn't end there, as you're going to immediately be thrown into a battle against the true Axon, the Mask Keeper. This is where things can get tricky because this boss has super long combos, and unless you fought Visages legitimately, you're likely gonna be in a Cacoletta Soul situation where the boss potentially gets multiple attacks while you're still at just 1 HP, and to make things even more oppressive, he calls upon the 3 emotion masks if you didn't already take them out. But that also is what gets him some extra points, because a boss that rewards the player for exploring the dungeon thoroughly is always cool in my book. Plus, his combos can be tricky, but they're a lot of fun to deal with as he uses different elements, especially when you get to phase 3. In this phase, he'll gain the unique ability allowing him to gain back his shield every time he lands a hit on a character, and he's got some pretty long combos. It just also does omni buffs in general. The fight is tough, and this is a good way that the boss is able to offset his otherwise very low HP. But that also means if you're good at parrying, he will go down very quickly from this point on. Overall, the fight is fantastic, and I have very few complaints with anything in the top 7. My only thing here is a nitpick, and that's the boss theme. A good song in its own right to be sure, but it's ultimately just kind of a battle theme we've already heard, with vocals added, which is cool. But they totally should have had the phase 3 music start playing the music that plays during the post-battle cutscene. I feel like that would have really brought it home and maybe kicked it up into the top 5. But for now, number 7 is more than good enough. Number 6, Renoir Final. The final boss of the game is awesome, but I'm just going to say now, the reason it misses the top 5 is because it's hard to find the perfect balance for the fight. If you go fight him as soon as Act 3 begins, he'll feel super oppressive and borderline impossible, but if you do some side quests, he'll likely be power crept hard by all the crazy post-game buffs and painted power allowing you to break the damage cap. I feel like the best way to fight him would probably be to be around level 60 on expert mode, but regardless, I think the boss needs a buff version if you've already killed the game's super bosses. This boss is split into multiple phases, with the first being essentially a fight against Renoir of old with his melee combos and powerful attacks, but thankfully he doesn't really seem to be that bad because this is just a warm-up phase. Because at half health, he'll start summoning out the 3 Axons, or the 2 Axons since Visage is a fake Axon, but hey, not important. They start joining in the fight as well, but it doesn't really matter because this phase will be over in a matter of seconds, because by the time you get here, his health is probably on its way out the door. But after that, some story scenes play as the Paintress joins the battle to assist you, and he will now fully heal as he heads into the painting of his family for a few moments to power up, and begins slowly but surely getting stronger. He also starts glowing, and the music in this phase is excellent. So now Renoir is collapsing space itself with his black holes while channeling the powers of the Axons. Meanwhile, Aline is assisting you by fighting them off. Except for Reacher, who's honestly just kinda happy to be here, this fight is a very cinematic battle, and it gets even crazier from here.
Let's dance.
Ali, look at Alicia, she can't be here. Aline, it's supposed to be you and me, not you against me.
Go home, Renoir. Go paint something else.
Why am I the only one who sees this?
to go.
The final phase is honestly mostly the same as phase 3, but it's here to be more of a home stretch as he's now got more debuffs in his arsenal, and I am exceptionally bad at avoiding them, but it acts as a great cap-off. This fight is hard to find the right balance for, but if you can, you'll be surprised how much fun you can have. Of course, this entire bit was recorded and scripted before the 1.3.0 update, which made it possible to rematch super bosses and modify enemy stats to make them even stronger. So now, if you wish, you can give this guy as much as 160 million HP, and that kind of alleviates my biggest issue with the fight, being that he's a little bit too squishy, but I stand by my overall placement due to, well, the fact is I still kinda wish he got scaled if you beat Simon. Either way though, excellent final boss.
It's time to stop painting.
Doctor! Papa also said, hold on to each other.
Old friend, you've traveled miles, spinning in circles. Your blind eyes on the dial, stripping
I'm sorry.
out colors. But it's time to say goodbye until next life.
But we're still not done, because now you have to take part in the final duel and decide which character you want to play as to determine your ending, either fighting as Verso or as Mael, all while my personal favorite song in the game, Drafts Collide, plays.
In this world we both reside. One wants to fade, the other stays beside. On this canvas, now it's mine, all we read. We're battling fight, we feel, the fate we feel. All draft collides in a desperate fight. But it's time to say goodbye.
It's also the one other song in the game that's in English, at least to my knowledge. Some may argue this final duel shouldn't be counted as a part of the final boss fight, but I personally think it brings everything together, and while neither ending is happy, I could see players siding with either outcome here. Personally, I'm more with Verso on this because while Mael does have a point, she's unfortunately someone that is unwilling to let someone go. I get that losing a loved one is painful. It tears you apart inside. But forcing someone to linger on well after their quality of life is gone just because you don't want to deal with the grief isn't the answer. Or, to put it this way, Verso really just wants to pass on, while Mael is here, and she's the kind of person that would force someone to live in an iron lung for years just because she doesn't want to say goodbye. But that's all just my own personal view on things, and to be fair, Mael is like 16 while Verso is 130. Some life experiences are going to be very different here. Number 5, Duelist. This boss is like if Pontiff Sullivan and Velstadt did the DBZ fusion dance, and it's excellent. This boss is the first required boss of Act 2, and it's your introduction to how crazy this game is going to get. Pontiff Sully's stat, the Royal Aegis, starts out intimidating with him expertly wielding the sword on fire, while having more demanding attacks than most other bosses have had so far. Up to this point, the required bosses were the likes of Avake, Curator, Goblu, Ultimate Sockpatot, and Lampmaster. Not easy fights, necessarily, but we've had bosses that were teaching us mechanics. But this boss is the first one to have access to basically all of the game's mechanics, meaning he has different combos, attacks that require jumping mid-combo, an AoE fire attack, and just overall higher aggression than anything from Act 1. It's a tough fight, but it's a fun one. But then you take out his health bar and he decides to pull out a second blade along with a second health bar, and if the first phase has some aggression, this dude is straight up combo city with one that goes on as long as 9 hits and ends with a gradient attack, on top of doubling the fire explosions and creating things like blood clones. Then he has a third and final phase that uses the same attacks, but he will now invert you, which means if you try to use healing items or skills, you'll take damage instead. However, passive healing like regen and healing parries are thankfully just nullified instead of damaging you. They don't punish you for being good, at least. That's nice. This status effect can be cleansed, but he might just reapply it, and I have to mention, this is where the game knocks it out of the park with the music. This boss theme is excellent. And for those going out of their way to take out all the super bosses, Duelist will return in the Flying Manor as one of the guardians to access the super boss fight against Clair, and if you're worried that he would have fallen off by the end game, you'd be wrong. Yes, some cheeky builds can one-shot him, but without those insane setups, he is still just as much of a threat and just as much of a real fight as he was before, and he can kill you just as easily. And you know what? I respect that this man is beating the jobber allegations. Duelist is the boss I would use to show someone footage of the game if I wanted to get them interested in it. It doesn't have absurd story spoilers, but it shows a lot of what this game has to offer without spoiling all of the surprises, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. He's the perfect boss to showcase because, well, this is the boss Ongball used to show off how cool this game is. And then he did the super boss as well, just because he's the insane guy who does no damage on those things. Number 4, False Renoir. Maybe a controversial take, but I actually like the second major fight against Renoir more than his final battle. Or, I guess, maybe this is his final battle, because this is the last fight against False Renoir, because the final boss is against the real Renoir, and I'm confusing myself. One of the reasons is because it's not a juggling act to find the right balance for the fight, it's just plain fun. As you'd imagine, this boss fight is split into multiple phases, like most bosses in this game now that I think about it. Phase 1 of the fight is basically his battle from Old Lumiere, just now with higher stats, but the real shakeup is when he loses half of his health. He summons this cool looking lion thing and heals to full, so now you have to cut through his 370,000 HP once again, while he's unleashing his strongest attacks from his old fight along with his Fatal Banish and attacks from the Dark Creature. Plus, the boss is now in a permanent enraged status, meaning he gets 2 attacks for every single turn. Basically, this dude is packing the cheater pictos for the rest of the fight. It's tough, but what do you expect from a fight against the game's main antagonist? And I have to mention that Andy Serkis kills it as Renoir. Legitimate S-tier casting choice, and I can't go without mentioning the boss music either, and how it's freaking perfection. But if you speak French, it basically spoils the entire plot of the game, as it's the story about how Renoir and Aline are pleading with one another to understand their side of the story, Aline being unable to move on after the loss of her son, while Renoir doesn't want her to spend the rest of her life wallowing in regret and sadness while she still has her life and 2 other children that are alive and need their mother just as much, with both of them asking one another to stop their futile quest and walk away before negotiations fail. And then it just turns into screaming at one another. You know what? Just listen. It's hard to believe that Lorian Testard went from being a SoundCloud musician to composing one of the greatest video game soundtracks of all time. Damn, dude. Number 3, Seiren. There's a question that has been posed for a good while now when it comes to games. Can video games be considered a form of art? To which I say yes, and look no further than this boss fight. As you might expect, this boss has multiple phases, 3 phases to be precise. They're all clearly divided, as this boss is structured like a 3-act musical, or maybe an opera, or maybe a ballet. Anyways, phase 1 is mostly calm, acting as the setup for things to come. There are still some dangerous attacks to keep an eye out for, such as her taking some glissandos as a boss you fought earlier, and using them as a weapon. Or she can also call upon the ballet enemies to assist her in battle, but more often than not she'll attack you with her dress before ending all of her turns with a follow-up action where she has a ballet attempt to come out and charm you, so hope you either have good dodging skills or the anti-charm ability ready to go. Phase 2 is where her dance becomes more frantic as things now become more dangerous, with the glissandos becoming a far more common attack, and her attack with the Grand Ballet summoning the Elemental Quintet of Maidens, whose attack I really suck at dodging or parrying. And now you're telling me there's gradient attacks thrown into the mix as well? God help us all. I wouldn't call this fight hard, in fact she might honestly be easier than the Visages, but the fight is still a ton of fun, while still having enough challenge to be engaging, while also just being an absolute feast for the eyes. Like, look at the flower petals overtaking everything and starting to tint the air around you, which is especially impactful when these flower petals likely belong to the expeditioners that failed against Seiren and Gamaged, as well as the demolition expedition that cleared the path for the future expeditioners. And of course, the music in this boss fight is absolutely beautiful. Then we get to the final phase, where she reaches her last third of HP as the game words it, the final act begins, as she starts using the environment around her to beat you with it, performing a long combo with the ballets and glissandos, before beating you overhead with the theater itself. After all is said and done, she sends out a Widow Ballet to cast Doom on a party member and fire off 2 shots instead of just 1. But once you've survived this, the fight is basically a done deal, and everything that remains is basically just the falling action as you finish the job. I do have a dumb question though. Is this Rinwar's Axon? From my understanding, each Axon represents one of the Descendry family members. She Who Moves the Earth was for Clair, the giant paintress avatar thing was Aline's, the Reacher is Alicia's, Visages is presumably Verso, given the dialogue after that fight and Verso never being one to really enjoy painting, but forced to do so anyways. So, I guess by process of elimination, Seiren's, and also Seiren's prominence in the final battle, the only real guess would be that Seiren is Rinwar's Axon. I'm also not a lore expert, and probably missed something, so hey, feel free to correct me in the comments. While this fight may not push me to my limits like some video game bosses, everything about this battle, from the build-up, to the music, to the different phases, it all is just a beautiful work of art. Yes, video games can very well be considered works of art, and nothing better represents that idea from this game for me than this boss fight. Number 2, Simon. While the presentation of the Seiren boss fight might be the best in the game, there is still the matter of gameplay, and in terms of a pure, fulfilling gameplay experience, Simon takes the lead there. For those looking for that thrilling challenge to put your otherwise overpowered post-game build to the ultimate test, Simon is the man for you. You know the drill by now, multiple health bars, multiple phases, but with the near 10 million HP in phase 1 and the absurd damage, he may just seem like enough of a beast on his own. until you've got it down and he ends up becoming just a minor speed bump that you'll no damage and take out in about 2 minutes on the way to the real fight. What exactly do I mean by that? Of course, when you take out his first health bar, you're presented with this From Software-ass Phase 2 boss cutscene where the eclipse becomes apparent in the background while he destroys the Unlimited Blade Works around the arena, and things start to get really serious as the vocals kick in. In Phase 2, all of his sword attacks from Phase 1 come back, just now with a follow-up attack from a Phantom Blue sword that honestly reminds me of the Moonlight Greatsword, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was an intentional reference on the developer's part, since, well, the lead dev is known to be a fan of Souls games. This boss is all about precise parries and keeping your cool under pressure because slip-ups can prove fatal, as not only will he 1 or 2 shot most characters, but he also has the ability to permanently erase a party member from the boss fight if they're still dead when his next turn rolls around. And he gets multiple turns in a row, so that's very likely. Plus, this boss introduces 2 new attacks, being the Sword of Lumiere that has 2 fake out spins, and his Speed of Light attack, which has an evil ass delay after the 7th slash to the point I just count everything out and throw delay in there. Sometimes I count it out in different languages just to be funny. But my god, was optimizing for this fight actually pretty fun. It wasn't a matter of getting the perfect gear or grinding to level 99, I already had my ideal weapons and enough Lumina to get all my passives set up, I just had to arrange things in a way that worked ideally for me, then execute. What I settled on was using Verso, Lune, and Minoko. Verso and Minoko having Cheater with the idea of either doing massive damage or burning the enemy, while Lune was there to assist with recovery and debuff Simon, on top of having Verso and Minoko do more damage when Simon is burning. Having Verso double attack, having his double attack inflict an attack buff on Verso and a defense debuff on Simon, and adding more and more burn to Simon to the point this man would be taking over 1 million damage from passive burn damage. Plus, with Simon constantly bringing party members down to 1 HP, it made Verso's Berserker Slash overpowered as hell. It's tough, brutally so, and seemingly insurmountable at first, but it's a fight where you can see yourself improving and getting a bit better, realizing this isn't just possible, but quite manageable if you're brave and you've learned how to parry. Or I guess dodge good. And then he hits the rage quit button and insta-wipes your main party. At this point, you're going to be required to send in your reinforcements to finish the job, so if you didn't have a busted ass build to skip Phase 3 entirely, I hope you set up Mael and CL. I did because I was preparing for more than just this fight. And now, in Phase 3, the music kicks into full gear, while the intensity cranks it up another notch that I wasn't even aware was on the... I don't know where I'm going with that expression. Anyways, he now has 2 Phantom Blade follow-ups, lashes, and each sword strike is going to be a lot harder. I was damn near pissing myself in my winning run when CL went down early, and Mael Gamage only did 5 million damage when he still had another 3 million or so HP left to go. But I had the Jarum, that weapon I got from defeating the Chromatic Jar, which not only added more to Simon's burn every single time it countered him, but it also put Mael in virtuous stance, making her do 200% more damage. And while Phase 3 is nerve-wracking, it doesn't actually introduce any new attacks, just increasing the intensity of pre-existing ones, which I would say is good game design considering how damn hard this fight is, and it made the nerve-wracking ending of my fight all the more awesome, where I had to deal with his 18-hit combo followed by his Flash of Light attack to an amazing clutcher kick moment. If you're looking for a satisfying challenge, you will find it here. This boss demands precision and highly recommends perfection, but if you're willing to measure up or meticulously craft a build that can mollywop him, you'll probably have a great time. But number 1 not only managed to scratch the fun challenge itch for me, but had the presentation that rivaled if not surpassing the likes of Seiren. And if you've played this game, you've already figured out who the boss fight is by this point, by process of elimination.
canvas from me.
This is what we created the expeditions for.
Tomorrow comes.
Saren may be a fun boss with beautiful presentation, and Simon may push me to my absolute limit, but the fact of the matter is, number 1 has secured herself a spot as one of my favorite video game bosses of all time. I'm talking on par with Soul of Cinder, Io, Lavos, Fectoelphalus. She's that damn good. The Paintress acts as the final boss of Act 2, and is in my opinion the toughest required boss in the game. You have to put everything you've learned to the test and use every weapon in your arsenal, but she won't simply be rolled over because you can't break the damage cap yet. In fact, this is the boss that lets you break the damage cap for beating her, so that's why she's so hard. She's your gatekeeper to all the overpowered post-game builds, and because of that, there's actually a genuine argument to be made that she's the toughest boss in the game even when put next to Simon. I don't personally agree with that argument, but you could argue that. The fight is just plain fun, and as you'd probably expect, it has multiple phases as a big war of attrition, but instead of just 2 health bars, the Paintress is the one boss in the game to have 3 health bars. Spooky. Phase 1 might actually be the hardest of the bunch though, because it's the one that demands precision, and playing this fight on expert mode leaves very little room for screwing up, but it can be a lot of fun as your big challenge, and that's not to say what comes next is easy, but it's more of when the game is going to get cinematic as heck. In fact, this is where the game gets more cinematic than ever before.
Renoir can grieve however he likes, but I get to grieve my own way. Full deck.
We're now in Phase 2 where we do battle in the sky on the back of Esquier, or his ethereal platform at least, while the Paintress has her giant idol behind her, all while being able to see Lumiere off in the distance as some sort of not-so-subtle reminder of what you've been fighting for. Her attacks in this phase are tricky, but more focused on the cinematics than being actually dangerous. So I'd say Phase 2 is honestly considerably easier, but that's okay because this is where the game is warming you up for what's to come, and it's not really that bad, all things considered. She's able to start ripping apart reality itself, and honestly, I have to wonder, how do you think this must look from Lumiere's perspective? Because you can see the Paintress all the way from there, so I imagine the sky splitting open would be no exception to that. Either way, in Phase 3, she gains a metric fuckton of shields to break through, and all your party members have Doom, or Curse, as this game calls it, repeatedly placed on them. At first I thought you had to either beat her fast, or keep curing the Doom somehow, but the real answer is those orbs floating overhead. With each orb you shoot, you regain 1 additional turn to survive, but it does cost AP to fire, so you have to decide the risk versus rewards. Do you want to save AP and go for more damage, or do you want to play it safer? You're either going to be cutting it closer and closer to death's door, or you'll be having to survive for longer. There's a risk and reward. I love that. Really, it just means there is no true answer, it's just whatever you think is best. And it also means you don't have to have a healer to keep cleansing the status effects constantly, but it might be better to have one just to keep up with the aggression. And I haven't even mentioned the music here. Lorien Testard's composition and Alice Duport-Persier's vocals come together to make another absolute masterpiece of a song. Genuinely an absolute masterpiece. But you're not done yet, as there's one last phase of the boss that has to be taken down, though phase 4 may as well be a foregone conclusion, as she gets the first action and she uses it to heal a party member, and you just have to put an end to her suffering at this point. She won't fight back anymore, it's just for story, but damn if it isn't effective storytelling, especially given the plot twist that follows, which I won't spoil for this one. This fight is just a beautiful battle built up for 2/3 of the game, and it more than pays off with one of the greatest fights in video game history that is a hill I am willing to die on. It's fun, it's epic, the music slaps, it's depressing, it tells so much of the story in such a short time. Truly a masterpiece of a battle, and an excellent cap off to Act 2. Sandfall, you outdid yourself. And that is all for this video. Holy shit, this game is a monster to make a boss ranking for. But I hope you enjoyed it half as much as I enjoyed ranking the bosses. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a masterpiece. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's a genuine work of art, pun not intended, and I highly recommend it to basically anyone. I'm not going to go talking about games and budgets, but the fact is, this is a AA game made by a team of 33 people and a dog, to show that a well-managed passion project can go farther than any inflated budgets ever could. For the longest time, the only AA studio that ever really caught my attention was Falcom, but I think Sandfall has more than earned a spot alongside them. This game is phenomenal. I can't recommend it enough, and I will be looking into whatever they make next. That's all I've got for now. I hope you enjoyed this comedically long boss ranking, and if you want to see more videos of varying quality, consider liking and subscribing. I'll see you all next time. Until then, I'm gonna go rest. Take care, everyone.